So the biggest eye opener for me was when I started paying attention to my energy was literally looking at the Hawkins energy scale. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a big part of it. But it talks about the energy of joy, the energy of peace, the energy of grief, the energy of fear, and the energy of guilt and shame. And just learning about that, I realized I spent so much of my life in guilt and shame, which is some of the lowest vibrations you can experience in life. And so for many of the women I work with, they're in that place, fear, guilt, and shame. And so when you're experiencing those lower energies, of course, it's going to be difficult to think clearly and have energy to create things in your life and move yourself in a direction that you desire. And I think there's a misconception. Sometimes people think like, well, I always need to be in joy. I always need to be in peace. And that's not always the way.
Welcome to the Baggage Begun Healing Hearts and Minds podcast. I'm your host, Tami Mahmali, a spiritual guide and hypnotherapist. I'm here to guide you on this healing journey toward holistic and spiritual well-being with ease. Each week, we will dive deep into the realms of self-discovery, offering you valuable tips, strategies, and actionable steps to help you restore harmony in your mind, body, and soul. Welcome to another episode of Baggage Begun. Today we are thrilled to have Dr. Kelly Kessler with us. She's not just a licensed physical therapist and transformation coach, but also the powerhouse behind the globally ranked podcast, Rewiring Health. Kelly's journey from battling her own health challenges to becoming a beacon of empowerment for high-achieving women is nothing short of inspiring. She will be sharing her secrets to overcoming self-abandonment, mastering nervous system regulation, and rewiring your subconscious mind for success. Hi, Kelly. I am so excited to dive into this conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very much looking forward to this.
So excited finally to be able to get together and have another podcast episode with you. So I just gave some short introduction about you. Next, I would love to ask you some questions that can guide our listeners, the people who are watching us, to get some better understanding of how they can help themselves to regulate their nervous system, to heal from abandonment, and anything else that we can holistically give here. So
Mhm.
I'm going to start.
Yeah.
Kelly, you have had quite the journey from overcoming eating disorders and chronic pain to helping others to transform their lives. What was the pivotal moment that made you realize you wanted to become a transformation coach and physical therapist?
Yeah. So it's been a culmination of all these things that I've gone through in my life, and I didn't realize how much I was being deeply impacted by really the same root cause. But the catalyst for all this was I really just kind of hit this moment where I'm like was sick of living like this. I had spent years thinking negatively about myself, ruminating on all the things that were going wrong in my life, fixated on everything that was missing, everything I felt like I was lacking, feeling like I was never enough, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I accomplished in my life. I just constantly felt like it was enough, not enough, and I was not enough. And it really all came to a head right around when the pandemic hit. And leading up to this, I had just gotten married. I was pregnant with my first son. I was still dealing with chronic back pain, and it really came to a point where we were building our house. My husband and I were the general contractors in the house, so I was working 5 days a week, driving an hour to and from work, coming back, and then working on the house, doing everything there, coordinating everything, while also trying to raise a newborn. And I was struggling so much internally, but yet had to put on this face of keeping it all together, feeling like that I could not let anything slip because there were too many things going on, and I was suffering deeply inside. And all along I was just suppressing everything that I was experiencing to hold it all together, and did not realize the impact of that as it accumulated. And I remember this one point when we were finally moved into our house, everything was just seemed like it was finally going to settle down. And it was when the pandemic hit, and my husband and I both got furloughed from our jobs. So here I am with a 9-month old. My husband and I we know our jobs are going to be lost. And I was sitting on the floor and I'm looking at my son and I'm like, I don't even feel like I was present for the first 9 months of his life. Like I was physically there, but I was in such a survival mode. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, there's just immediate grief for living not only the last year of my life with just not being present, but really realizing that I had spent so much of my life not living. I had spent so much of my life surviving, trying to just get through the next thing, thinking that one day things will settle down. One day things will finally open up and I'll be able to enjoy my life and feel free. And here I am, externally looking at so many things that I should be grateful for, a new house, a husband, a child. And I'm sitting here and I don't feel any of it. It just feels like which just made me feel even more empty because externally I should be happier. I should feel more joy. I should be at peace because things are coming together, but I'm just so lost, so depleted, so exhausted. And I just hit that point where I'm like, I don't want to live like this anymore. And I did not know what to do, but I just knew I refused to live the rest of my life like I lived the last 20 years of my life.
Wow. So, how did your personal battle with just surviving, going through this self abandonment you're talking about, and perfectionism shape the unique methods you use today to guide others towards healing and empowerment in your practice?
Yeah. So I've lived it and I didn't even realize I was living it when I was. And that's why I share this message so much with women because for years I normalized this, thinking this is just what life is that you're constantly supposed to keep working, go for the next thing, keep on seeking out that validation to think that you're enough. And yet everything came out empty. Every achievement I went through, empty. Going through the eating disorder thinking that if I look a certain way, I'll feel better about myself. I'll feel like I'm enough. Empty. That did nothing fulfilled me. Then dealing with chronic back pain subsequent to the eating disorder and subsequent to what I realized now was a lot of emotional turmoil that was going on inside me, thinking that okay, if I can just heal myself and feel better, then things will like lighten up and life will get better. Never happened. And so I was seeking out all these things outside myself over and over and over again to fill the void within myself. And so I bring that into my practice today because I realize now what I didn't realize then is that it starts from within. We have to cultivate this sense of worth within ourselves. We have to cultivate the sense of safety and peace within ourselves, and then our external world changes. I was going about it the opposite. I was trying to change my external world, work harder, do more, thinking that somehow I'd feel fulfilled. And so now that my whole life has transitioned from feeling like the world is working against me to realizing that everything truly was working for me. And now that I have that mindset and that belief in everything that happened throughout my life, I realize that all those struggles and challenges, that those tears, those lonely nights, those lonely days, I realized that it was all building me up to have a foundation to be the person I am today and to help people who are going through those very same challenges.
Can you talk about the mystery of self abandonment, what it is really mean, and how does it sneak into our lives?
Yeah. So self abandonment is really a sense of betraying yourself. So it's a sense of thinking that you're not worthy of being heard or that you are trying to keep the peace in others so you stay silent. So self-abandonment can show up in a lot of ways. For me, it was very much people pleasing. So I would always direct my energy outside myself, make sure everybody is okay, trying to take care of everybody's emotional needs and be there for other people. But yet I was compromising myself in the process, not speaking up for myself, trying to keep the peace at the expense of myself. So that was one way that self-abandonment showed up in my life. Perfectionism was another one, thinking that I had to achieve this unobtainable standard in my life and striving for that over and over again, grinding, trying to keep working harder and harder. And yet I was costing myself a lot of energy drain. I was feeling completely depleted doing that over and over again and feeling just that I was worthless in the process because no matter how hard I tried, I would never meet that standard that I held for myself. Another way that self abandonment showed up in my life is thinking that others' needs matter more than my own. And so I would again just silence myself, not validate my own experience and allow others to dictate what my needs are. So I never took a moment to listen to myself. What do I want out of my life? I tried to curtail subconsciously my life to other people's needs, expectations, and desires, and basically fit the form of what people viewed me as rather than taking a moment to think about who am I? What do I want out of this life? And so self abandonment can really creep up in so many ways. And if you asked me 10 years ago, do I self abandon? First of all, I wouldn't even really know what that was, and I would probably say no, because I became so used to living like that and thinking that this is the only way to live, that I didn't realize how much I was letting those things control me until I took a step away from it and now can see it from a much more clear perspective.
This is great awareness for people who abandoning themselves and they don't really know the signs. So I'm grateful that you provided some of the signs of self abandonment. You mentioned abandoning yourself, meaning betraying yourself by people pleasing, being there for others and not so much for yourself, perfectionism, overworking and sacrificing yourself for others, not listening to your inner self, thinking other needs matter more. And basically, it's not validating your own experiences, voices, needs, and desires. If someone just starting to notice these patterns in their life, what are some practical and impactful first steps that you can offer towards healing themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing is that awareness. And so once you have that awareness that you're starting to engage in some of these patterns that are self abandonment or are self betrayal, the first thing you want to do is give yourself some grace and show yourself some love in that moment, because we can often look at all the times that we abandon ourselves, let other people kind of dictate how we behave or what our desires are, or all the times we said no to ourselves to say yes to others. We can very much look at that and then shame ourselves for it because time has gone by and we maybe have not lived a lot of our life for ourselves. So the first thing you want to do after you bring awareness to it is give yourself some grace and give yourself some love in that moment and realize that you did the best you could with what you knew at that time. And then from that point on, then you want to start to pour some energy into yourself. And so this is not a big life overhaul because that can often backfire if you're trying to change everything in your life. But start with the smallest thing that you can do. And that's even if you take 5 minutes a day to sit quietly with yourself, to write a thank you note to yourself, to do some breath work, whatever a practice is, start to invest some time and energy into yourself, because the more you start to invest in yourself, the more you realize that you're worthy of your own time and energy. And the less tolerance you'll have for people who try to take that away from you. And so it's really just starting to reconnect with yourself, because when you self abandon and you self betray, you become so disconnected from yourself that you don't even know what you want. You don't even know what brings you joy. You don't know what you even desire in this life. There's so many women I work with, and I'll ask them, like, what's your vision for your life and what do you want? And they can't answer it because they've lived so many years living for somebody else's dream that they haven't connected with their own. So that quiet time and that time and energy investment in yourself is absolutely key in the beginning and throughout.
I think it's very important, like you mentioned, the awareness, being compassionate about yourself, give yourself grace, let go of shame and guilt about whatever happened in the past, how you treated yourself until now. It's okay to start fresh from now. Pour energy to yourself, start with small steps. And to know the best part is to know yourself better and connect, invest in yourself instead of putting all this energy outside in other people, which is basically most of the time is people pleasing. You shared a little bit about your client. Can you share an inspiring story about people who turn their life around by healing this part of self abandonment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a client who I was dealing with a lot of family issues, a lot of things going on. And she was very much that people pleaser, always looking outside herself to make sure everybody is okay. And in the process, she was dealing with a lot of health issues, dealing with a lot of things that were going on as far as feeling exhausted, overwhelmed. And she kept pouring more and more into other people. And then when I met her, at that point, she was not sleeping well, completely exhausted, fatigued. And by doing some of these practices, so tuning into the body is a big part of what I do, because the body is what is the true experience of what we have in life. So when we are experiencing constant stress from the self abandonment, our body embodies that. And so working through the body and teaching the body that it's safe in this moment allows our mind to open up to the possibility of something different. And so did a lot of body work with her, breath work, visualization throughout that, a lot of different practices. And towards the end of my time working with her, she was reporting that she was feeling a release within herself. She was feeling more free. She felt like she finally had permission to speak her truth. She felt like she could advocate for herself, and she was sleeping better. She reported less sleep disturbances throughout the night. She reported that she was able to get to sleep quicker and that she had less pain overall in her body by investing in herself and allowing herself to move into a different direction. And she also reported feeling more love for herself in the process. So she was very much someone who consistently self abandoned and was well on her way to the process, which is a lifelong process of continually investing in your own self and realizing your worth and love for yourself.
I think it's wonderful, and I'm sure that our listeners can benefit from that. Before we move to nervous system regulation, I just want to talk about the book, The Abandonment Recovery Workbook. It's a book that you can go through and track your progress as you go through the process of healing your heart and mind. And this author, Susan Anderson, I really recommend. I'm not affiliated with the book, but I really recommend this book. I went through it and I suggested to my clients, and I saw amazing results. So if someone interested, the Abandonment Recovery Workbook by Susan Anderson, it's a great one. And we're gonna move next to, I think one of the things that I love to hear about what you do is the nervous system regulation, the power of this regulation. I want you to elaborate, if it's possible, why is nervous system regulation like the secret source of overall well-being? I hear you talking about that a lot. Can you explain its importance in a way that makes it clear why everyone should be paying attention to their nervous system regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with just what the nervous system is and the basis of it. So within our body, we have the autonomic nervous system, and this is a part that regulates our heart rate, our breathing, our blood pressure, our hormones, reproductive hormones, digestive tract. It's literally every function within your body that allows you to live without having to consciously think about it. And so when our nervous system is working well and it's regulated, it is able to appropriately respond to the environment. So if there is something that is stressful, then it responds by creating a stress response where it can focus on that. And it's set up like primitive time. So if there was a lion, it would run from the lion. It would allow you to freeze or fight the lion, and it would respond to things that are threats appropriately. And then when the lion was removed, you could go back to a restful state. And that's how our nervous system is supposed to work, that it responds. So in more modern times, if someone cuts you off, you want your nervous system to respond in a stress response, because you want to be uber focused, slam your foot on the brake, and so that you don't rear end somebody and get hurt. But then when the car is gone and the situation is over, you should be able to relax and breathe through that. And so that would be a healthy nervous system that responds appropriately. Unfortunately, with today's society where we're bombarded by stressors, from the news, from emails, demands of people, but especially for women who self-abandon, women who are constantly putting others' needs in front of their own, they are in a chronically stressed out state. So the nervous system responds very differently than it would in a healthy nervous system. So when you're chronically stressed and you have stress a stressful situation, say somebody calls you and it's a very stressful thing, you go into this stress response, which is also known as the sympathetic nervous system. So again, your heart rate starts increasing, your breathing rate increases, your blood pressure increases, digestion decreases, all these changes in order to respond to that. But instead of going back down to a restful state after that phone call is over, we stay up in that stressful state. So we stay chronically stressed out and our nervous system stays on in that sympathetic response. The problem is when we are in a dysregulated state like that, and we're not having these nice ebbs and flows of the nervous system from rest to a more stressful state, our system and our bodies start to internalize that. And this is where we start to get breakdown. This is where you see chronic pain occurring. This is where you see increased fascial tension, which is your connective tissue within your body. This is where you see digestive issues. If it's prolonged long enough, you start to see autoimmune disorders. You start to see heart problems. So our system is not designed to stay in a sympathetic, stressful state for long durations. But this is what we're seeing more often with people, is that they're in this dysregulated state. What the experience is when, mentally and emotionally, is that now you're hyper vigilant over things. You perseverate on negative things, so you can't get those negative thoughts out of your mind. You are very irritable. You may become moody, and you stay in that state until basically you kind of hit your point of like, I'm exhausted. And then instead of going back down to a restful state, you drop straight down. And then that's when you become really apathetic, exhausted, chronic fatigue. So you see these big spikes in the nervous system when it's dysregulated. So in order for us to get back to a place of a regulated state where we have these nice smooth transitions, we have to honor our nervous system. We have to start bringing it back to a place of safety, to realize that we don't have a lion in front of us at all times. And we need to start to allow ourselves to buffer those stressors in our life in a better way.
Wonderful. This information that you just right now guiding the listeners, it's very important. That's why I want to ask you next, what are some beginner friendly tips for someone looking to start regulating their nervous system effectively?
So the biggest thing is one of the biggest gateways of that is breath work. Breath work is a huge place to start. And I always just start with just something simple. So a physiological sigh is something that you can do. It's a very just simple breath work practice. And what that is inhaling through your nose for a count of 6. And then when you feel like you fully have a breath, take another little sip of air through your nose. And then you slowly exhale for a count of 8. Through your mouth or your nose, and then just repeating that. So that is just one simple practice you can do at any point throughout the day. If you have trouble sleeping at night, go through a few of those. If you're feeling stressed out after something, take a few minutes to do that breath work. So that's just one way to start to anchor in and allow your nervous system to become more regulated. There's a lot of breath work practices within that also contribute to that. But another way is the vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve. It goes from your brain all the way down through your organs, and it plays a huge role in allowing you to shift over to that parasympathetic state, so that rest, digest, restore. And so one way you can activate that vagus nerve is just by gently massaging behind your ear or in front of your ear. So kind of separating your fingers in front and behind your ear and just gently massaging the side of your neck. So that's another way just to allow yourself to transition into that place. There's a lot of other things you can do with the vagus nerve as well. And then also your visual system. So your visual system is a direct external link to your brain. So a lot of us tend to get fixated on screens. So what happens with that is that we have a very narrowed focus on a screen with a dilation of our pupils. And that triggers our brain to say that we're in a stress response, because that's the exact response we have with our eyes when we are stressed. So when we are focused on a screen, we're actually creating a stress response within our brain just because of the position of our eyes. So allowing yourself to look and have a wide gaze, so looking at a vista or looking outside and allowing yourself to a relaxed gaze of your eyes, a broad visual field allows your pupils to narrow, and that triggers your brain that this is something we can be in a more calm response. So changing your visual system is another thing. So if you are on screens all day, just doing that once every hour is going to make a big difference for your nervous system as well. So that's just a few practices that you can do to start regulating your nervous system.
So we can really help ourselves throughout the day so we don't feel so overwhelmed and it's really affecting our nervous system, like you said. I'm going to
Mhm.
shift to another subject that it's the subconscious mind reprogramming. You talk about it a lot and
Mhm.
how it influences us. So I wanted to ask you, how does our subconscious mind steer our behaviors and stress levels? What are some common patterns that might be holding people back, stuck, overwhelmed, or maybe even in a stress response?
Absolutely. So the subconscious mind is the mind that is basically formed from ages 0 to 7. So depending on who you had as an authority figure when you're a child and how their influence played a role in your life, a lot of those messages come from that point because your brain is in a certain wave state, mostly like a theta wave state, where it's very receptive to everything. It becomes a sponge and believes everything is truth. So a lot of the subconscious beliefs that we have were developed from childhood, but unfortunately, many of the beliefs that we have are self-defeating from that time. So we often hold on to those messages of feeling like maybe we're not enough, feeling like maybe things have to be perfect, feeling like I have to show up and take care of everybody or they're going to leave me and abandon me. So I'll abandon myself in order to make sure everybody else is okay. So these messages that we hold are our subconscious beliefs and they are running in the background over and over and over again, and we may not even be aware of it. We just live our life with these belief systems that were literally developed from our childhood unless we become aware of what's running our lives. And so that's why the subconscious mind is literally the root and key to everything, and understanding why do we believe this about ourselves? Why do we believe this about other people? Why do we believe this about the world? Everything is running off of that belief system. And so then we end up running our lives based off of the past because those beliefs were situated in the past. So, in order to change our subconscious mind and change our life, we have to start to create a new vision, a new experience in our life. And that comes from our emotional experience. So, we have to create the emotions that we desire in our life. So, if we want more joy, we have to create that in our minds and become more familiar with the patterns of emotions that we desire in our life, because our brain will move to what is most familiar. So if you've been running on the same subconscious beliefs for 30, 40, 50 years, your brain is going to gravitate to that over and over and over again. So this is where we have to make a conscious effort to create the experience that we desire, to make that more familiar so that our brain can move in the direction of what we want in our life, not what was programmed from our childhood.
Can you give us a peek into the process of subconscious mind reprogramming? How can someone begin this journey towards a healthier mindset through reprogramming their subconscious mind?
Yeah. So, one powerful technique is visualization. So, literally closing your eyes and thinking about a place that maybe brings you peace or joy. So, some place that I always visualize is Hawaii. I absolutely love Hawaii. So, I will literally just close my eyes and put myself there and just feel what it feels like to be there. And so, through that visualization, I tap into all my senses. So, I picture myself sitting there on the sand, what the sand feels like. And I'm literally visualizing this, making this as real as possible. So I feel the sand, I smell the breeze, I feel the breeze of the ocean. Maybe I'm tasting some pineapple that I just ate, and I'm allowing myself to have a sensory experience in my mind. And through that, then I allow myself to feel what I would feel like if I was literally sitting on that beach in Hawaii, and all these amazing things are in my life and all the things I desire in my life, and allow myself to sit in those emotions. And for me, that brings me a lot of peace when I visualize that, a lot of joy. And I allow myself to experience this as if it was really happening in this moment, because our minds can't differentiate between what's reality and what is perceived in our minds. So when we create that experience in our minds, our bodies embody that as if it is real. So we start to reprogram everything and become more familiar with what we are consciously selecting rather than what was put there.
Another thing that you're talking about is trusting our inner authority.
Mhm.
What does it mean to trust and use your inner authority? Is it your inner voices, your intuition?
Yes. Yeah. So it's your intuition, but also knowing your desires. So it's a combination, listening to what's that feeling inside? What's that deep knowing that you have? And when you're just starting out, this can feel so foreign. If you asked me what my inner authority was years ago, I would have just given you an answer of what everybody said that it should be in my life. And so takes a practice to understand what you want, what your inner voice is. And I'm still practicing that every day to get that connection stronger. But it is a combination between your intuition, so that inner voice that's guiding you along the way, and also your inner desire, which is really the same thing too, is just understanding what do you want out of your life. Like, what do you want? And that's a really challenging question, because when you've lived 20, 30 years doing what everybody else wants, to ask yourself what you want without the other external influences is challenging. But that's your inner authority, is that once you can anchor into, this is what I want in my life, this is what I am willing to accept in my life, this is not what I'm willing to accept in my life, and move yourself in the direction of where you want to be. So if it's peace you want in your life, joy you want in your life, you are listening to your own inner voice on how to get there. And that's what it is, rather than listening to the external world or the pressures of society saying, no, you should stay at that job, it's comfortable, or no, you should stay in that town because you know it and you already have a house there. Those are those external voices that can quiet our inner authority. But if you know deep down that you want something bigger in your life, or you want to change locations, or you want to go do something in your life, it's trusting that, and trusting that you know better for yourself than anyone else does.
So you were talking basically about our intuition. How can someone that never listened to their intuition or maybe even ignore their intuition can start tuning into this inner guide, as you call it, to make better decisions in their lives? Instead of asking everyone else, how can they tap into themselves to find the answers?
Yeah. So it takes that moment of quiet reflection within yourself. So sitting quietly, and this is so challenging. When I first started, my mind was just a chatter, and it's just thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. So I'm like, why do I want to sit quietly with myself? Because I don't even want to hear myself. Like, I didn't like the what was going on in my head because it was all negative. So it takes a practice of allowing yourself to move through that. And I can sit quietly in myself now and hear a voice that is calming and peaceful and is guiding. But when you're first starting out and you have all this negative chat in your mind, it can be really difficult to tap into your intuition, because your mind is capitalizing on everything that's going on. But this is where you really have to just lean into it and practice that, and allow those thoughts to pass, let them go. Visualize, even if they're on a stream, they're going down the stream. And the more you can practice that sitting quietly with yourself, the more you can start to hear the inner voice that is supportive. And a big thing to know, and this was challenging for me, was when I had all the negative dialogue, is to realize that your intuition is not going to come out of fear. It's not going to come out of force or power. It's not going to make you feel bad about yourself. So that's a really important way to differentiate intuition versus negative mind chatter, is that how does it making you feel? And when you can start tapping into your intuition, you feel this a sense of deep knowing, a sense of empowerment, a sense of calm, a sense of peace. And if that's how you're feeling by something that's going on within your mind, that is more of your intuition, and that's what you want to lean into.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people whenever they let go and finally take a walk or just go take a nap, then the intuition actually giving them the answer. So I think this is a good
Mhm.
practice to do. Since we're talking about subconscious and intuition, let's talk about energy awareness, how it's impact us. How does being conscious of your energy affect our overall well-being? What are some simple practices to help our listeners to become more aware and in control of their own energy?
Absolutely. So the biggest eye opener for me was when I started paying attention to my energy was literally looking at the Hawkins energy scale. So if you're not familiar with that, that was a big it's a big part of it. But it talks about the energy of joy, the energy of peace, the energy of grief, the energy of fear, and the energy of guilt and shame. And just learning about that, I realized I spent so much of my life in guilt and shame, which is some of the lowest vibrations you can experience in life. And so for many of the women I work with, they're in that place, fear, guilt, and shame. And so when you're experiencing those lower energies, of course, it's going to be difficult to think clearly and have energy to create things in your life and move yourself in a direction that you desire. And I think there's a misconception. Sometimes people think like, well, I always need to be in joy. I always need to be in peace. And that's not always the way, but can we be neutral? Can you just be in a neutral space? So for the women I work with, I work on them getting to a neutral space. So a lot of times, they'll have negative self-talk, like I'm not good enough at that, or I can't do that. I'm not capable. And instead of trying to move them into this direction of like joy, like, oh, I'm wonderful at that. I'm amazing. It feels too far for them. So for those energy levels, we have to move into a neutral, curious space. Like, what would it be like if I tried? I'm learning until I figure it out. Just using some of those inner dialogue to change the dialogue that we've had can allow us to elevate in that energy scale. So that's a big part as far as where our vibration is. But when we're talking about our energy of like how we're feeling and our vibrancy and our ability to do all the things in life, a big thing is pouring into yourself and investing in yourself. And I use the example of if you had a bank account and you deposited money every day into this bank account. Every day you're working on depositing money into this bank account, and then somebody came by and took a huge withdrawal. You would be pissed about that. You wouldn't allow it. So it's the same thing, your energy. If you invest in yourself every single day, you're going to protect your investment much more by doing that. So even if it's 5 minutes that you pour into yourself and pour your energy into yourself, you're going to be much less likely to allow somebody to take your energy away or to deplete it like you may have in the past. So it all comes down to investing in yourself over and over and over again.
And repetition, consistency, doing
Mhm.
it every day, being mindful about it every day, being mindful of our energy. Some days we wake up and we don't feel like it. And like you said, if I am forcing or I'm in fear, I can't really let my intuition giving me the answers or helping me be more creative. That's why I think it's very important to be aware of our energy and learn techniques or tools to align, to keep ourselves balanced, even in those days that we don't feel like it. So
Mhm.
that's why I think here the energy is very important. And I liked what you said about the low energy vibration. In my field, I see how it blocks us from feeling the joy, the happiness, and being able to create. When we are blocked with all this shame, guilt, fears, a lot of time it's anger and resentment too for me. Be aware of your feelings, acknowledge them, respect yourself, the
Mhm.
passion, like you mentioned a lot of times, journaling about that, being mindful, talking to someone that you trust so you can take the load off, and maybe even going to professional person and through hypnosis clearing it, going to coach to elevate you and give you some clarity, elevate you and show you what else is possible. I like the being curious, neutral and curious. uh,
Absolutely.
Next, I
Yeah.
want to ask you about your daily routine. What are some
Mhm.
easy to implement daily practices that you think can help maintain mental and emotional health? And how can high achievers or regular people add them into their schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. So big thing that I do is book into my day. So I have a practice in the morning and then I have one in the evening because those times tend to be less clustered with things. And just to share, as far as understanding people's busy schedules, like I have two children, a 2 and a 5-year-old right now. I'm growing my own business. I'm still working part-time for another place. So like I understand a busy schedule, and that means it's even more important to be non-negotiable with your practice. So you could very easily make the excuse of like I'm too busy for this, but if you're busy, it's even more reason why you need to fit this daily routine. So in the morning, I wake up and I usually do a morning prayer and some breath work in the morning. And then I step outside on my porch and I get some sunlight into my eyes. So that is really crucial for setting your circadian rhythm, elevating your energy, boosting your alertness, and actually increasing your cortisol in the morning. So that way it goes down so you can sleep better at night. So I get outside on my porch, view the sunlight, and then I take some deep breaths and then just express gratitude. I'll just express gratitude for just the fact that I can step out and have a breath of fresh air and the sunlight and the dogs are running or whatever it is. I just show some gratitude in that. And that's usually my morning routine. Throughout the day, I have little practices. So I have some transitionary practices where if I'm going from one thing that I need to focus on to the next, I have a practice where I transition to that. And so for me, it's literally just like shaking out my body, saying a release within my head, taking some deep breaths, and then setting the intention for the next activity that I'm doing. So transitioning is really important because going from a role of a mom to then working on my business, it requires a different aspect of me. So I have to release some of the energy that I have from being a mom, and then so I can focus on what I need to with my business. So transitionary practices are really key for me. I do breath work throughout the day. So if I'm having a stressful moment, I do breath work in that moment, allow myself to feel what I'm feeling. That has been something that's been really big in my life because for so long I would numb myself to the emotions. So I've given myself permission to just feel it. So if I've had a lot going on this year personally in my life, and so there's a lot of moments where grief will come up unexpected, and I allow myself to feel that. And that's been really key in my healing, is allow those emotions to come up. And then at night, I have a journal where I write 3 things I'm grateful for or 3 wins for the day. And then I read a book, a personal development book, at least 10 pages every night. And then I do a meditation before bed. So that's my current practice, but it changes. It changes consistently. But what doesn't change is that I'm doing it consistently. So I may add things or take some things out depending on the experience in my life. But every day I'm doing something for myself and showing up for myself.
Wonderful. So, for someone just starting out on their journey of self healing and empowerment, what's the one piece of advice you would like to give?
The biggest thing I would like to give, because we can often find excuses for not starting to work on ourselves, and we can often think that, okay, when things settle down, then I'll do it. But, a quote from Albert Einstein that I always love to reference is, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So if you are thinking, feeling, and behaving the same way, even if it's subconsciously and you don't change anything, you're only guaranteeing that your external circumstances will probably remain the same. You'll continue to get the same lessons handed to you until you're receptive to learning lessons in life. So it is time in this very moment to start investing in yourself. And so even if you find 1, 2, 3 minutes every day, start doing something, even if it's the smallest thing, to move yourself forward. Because when I started out and I was hitting that low point back then, I had no idea what to do. I just knew I needed something different. So you'll find breadcrumbs in your life. For me, it was, I started out just doing breath work, and then that opened a door to finding another resource that I would go into. And then I started using my body in a different way and learning things with that. And then I started reading more. So start with the smallest thing that you can do today, and then be receptive to things that come into your life that become the next breadcrumb in your journey.
How can our listeners connect with you and dive deeper into your transformative work?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on my website. It's optimalu, healthandwellness.com, or you can find me on social media under Dr. Kelly Kessler. And I have a free guide to reclaiming your peace and inner harmony for your nervous system. So that you can find that on my website. It gives you 8 daily practices that you can incorporate. So just like I was talking about bookending your day, small things you can do at night and the evening that don't consume your day, but make a huge difference in your life.
This was really great. And as we come to the end of today's episode, I wanted to express my gratitude to you, Kelly, for joining us. Your insights on nervous system regulation, subconscious mind reprogramming, and overcoming self abandonment have been incredibly valuable. I'm so appreciative of the wisdom you have shared from your personal journey and professional expertise. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and adding to our exploration of holistic healing. Your work and experience have for sure inspired and empowered whoever was listening today to tap and achieve their own change. For those who want to dive deeper into Dr. Kessler's work, make sure to check out the links in the show notes. And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember to stay connected to your inner wisdom and keep embracing your journey of growth. Thank you so much again, Kelly. I am grateful to you for joining us today.
Thank you. I truly enjoy this conversation, Tammy. I'm so honored and grateful to be on here today.
Thank you, and I see you soon.
If you're curious and want to dive deeper, you are in the right space. I ask you to look within for all the things that you want to do, be, and have. Join me at the Baggage Begun Healing Hearts and Minds podcast with new episodes every Wednesday as we discover the path towards healing and transformation.